Hey guys, welcome back. So now getting back into our talks of Dawn of X, and with doing so, beginning our talks on Excalibur, which initially took some deep cuts in a direction that I wasn't too crazy about, but in relation to everything else going on in Marauders, X-Force, New Mutants, and really just watching how it's starting to unfold, it made me kind of go back and take another look. So let's get into it, but first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so essentially with the series starting off in Camelot within Otherworld, to where here Morgan Le Fay is being attacked by the forces of someone she calls the White Witch, which I have my theories on and we'll get into that pretty early as well. But one of the things I was thinking early on, and I told myself like when I do this video, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna make this clear so that people don't get it confused with some of the other recent videos. And that first thing that I want to get out the way is that this is not the same Morgan Le Fay that we've talked about recently with Weapon H. And I really feel like I gotta get this out the way because in my mind, I see the comment section of the future. And for good reason, I can see a lot of the people getting the two mixed up. But just to be clear, that Morgan Le Fay, who I usually refer to as Queen Morgan Le Fay, she comes from Earth 15238, to where later she was trapped in Weirdworld, sold into slavery, and then during the incursion, Weirdworld was saved by God Emperor Doom, to whom during Secret Wars he made it a part of Battleworld, along with portions of Earth 15238, and from there she became the Baroness / ruler of Weirdworld. Well, really Baroness during Secret Wars and ruler after. And so now I mention this not only to make the distinction clear, but also as a slight reminder with her returning in the Weapon H series after being in prison and having her power drained for some time by Dario Agger, that once again as a reminder she's still out there, but these are two different people. And I got more about her in the Weapon H playlist, but I just wanted to make it clear that that's not the Morgan Le Fay that we're talking about here. And it is possible that she could show up in Excalibur later on, but as of right now, I really don't see anything foreshadowing that just as yet. But so now for this Morgan Le Fay, who's more of your Morgan Le Fay Prime. She resides in Camelot within Otherworld, which is like the center of magic throughout Marvel, kind of like their Rock of Eternity, because it's from here where you have Merlin, who gave Brian Braddock the choice in which to save his life with choosing the amulet or the sword, to where between the amulet of right and the sword of might, the amulet was life and the sword was death, of which Brian chose the amulet because he didn't consider himself to be much of a warrior, but after his first conflict proving victorious, after taking down Joshua Strag, the Reaver, and after doing so at the time, Braddock was said to be Britain's greatest new warrior, who we would later find out would be one of many with your Captain Britain Corps, which stretches throughout the multiverse, of which was given the duty to guard the multiverse, and this Captain Britain Corps was of course created by Merlin, who many years before had taught Morgan Le Fay magic in order to prevent the fall of Camelot. And so now where we jump in with Excalibur, which starts off with a lot of mystery, and how it starts off here with her pulling her nephew, Sir Garrus, to which she pulls inside the castle to show him that Camelot is being invaded by these strange weeds, which have been mysteriously climbing their way into Camelot. And this is something that Morgan Le Fay also connects to the attack from the White Witch, with all of these things blitzing her kingdom at the same time. And so now, just for a minute, just to place my big toe in the realm of speculation, I'm just gonna make a guess, like with everything that's going on in Marauders right now, that the White Witch is Emma Frost, and the quote-unquote weeds that are growing all over Camelot, they're just extensions of Krakoa that she's using to do whatever she's doing, which is likely more than just invading Otherworld with a bunch of weeds. But I just want to put that out there. Could be, might not be, who knows. And I've also given some thought to a crazy twist where it might be Roma, the daughter of Merlin, but I couldn't quite put any logic to it, so I said I'll forget it. And so for now, I'm just sticking with Emma Frost. But from here, jumping over to Krakoa, where we now have the recent arrival of Betsy Braddock, who's made her way here very seamlessly from the Braddock Academy in Malden, England. And so now as for her, I won't really get into the whole transition of her getting back into her original body, because we had talked about that back in the Hunt for Wolverine, and I'll leave a link below if you need to check that out. But I do gotta say, like, just seeing her like this in Dawn of X, like, it's good to know that that whole Hunt for Wolverine and all that wasn't for nothing. And I mean, I would like to get a bit more cohesiveness, and like looking back on that stuff, we've gone so far in another direction since House of X and Powers of 10, to where like now when I think back on the Hunt for Wolverine and the Return of Wolverine, which okay, it almost seems like that was only for the War of Realms and just a little bit of Thor, which continued after. But we'll see if any of that comes back, because if still relevant, hopefully Dawn of X will clear that up, or perhaps Jason Aaron or Donny Cates may reiterate that in some form or fashion. But either way, back to Krakoa, when we come across Apocalypse, who's having this conversation with Trinary around the time that Betsy Braddock arrives here. But in this conversation, she also mentions that between herself, Cypher, and Sage, that they haven't been able to pass through this one specific door, door. But it's here that Apocalypse also explains to Trinary that some things can't just be calculated or figured out, but instead they need to be discovered. But immediately he recognizes that this door leads to Otherworld, and more specifically Camelot, and in order for them to pass through here, they'll need a champion. And so now from here we jump over the Fairgreen Hall, which is like the home of the Coven's Solar Blackwood. And at this time, High Priestess Mariana Stern, who's here with members of her coven, fending off a number of ghosts, to where not long after they're met by a projection of Sir Garrus, who then tells them that the Queen requests to speak with them. And when Morgan Le Fay appears, she pretty much tells them that she's cutting them off from magic because of their betrayal and their threat to Camelot in the waters of Avalon. And initially Mariana Stern, she doesn't know what Morgan Le Fay is talking about because neither her or any one of her coven would dare to attack the source of their power. But when Morgan Le Fay shows them the weeds that have been growing in the waters of Avalon, it's then immediately that they notice that these plants are from Krakoa. And when Mariana tries to make the argument that these plants belong to mutants and that these aren't the workings of any human, and this is something pretty recognizable on Earth because as of right now, Krakoa is like all over the news. But of course, Camelot doesn't get Earth news like that, so because of this, Morgan Le Fay just tells them that they need to find the source and destroy it, and she doesn't care if it came from mutants or not, because to Morgan Le Fay, she just puts them all in the same category. But she tells her that they have to find the source and destroy it because she's busy defending her kingdom, and until they destroy it, Morgan Le Fay is gonna cut them off from magic indefinitely, which kind of limits their means of doing so, but Mariana got it figured out. But so now jumping back to Krakoa, you also have Betsy Braddock, who arrives at the hatchery at the arrival of her older brother, Jamie Braddock Jr., who's also known as Monarch, and his powers are like reality warping, and I want to say he's used magic at times, but I'm not really sure if that's still a thing. But shortly after the birth of her older brother, which sounds crazy just saying it out loud, but not long after, she's met by Apocalypse, who tells her that they need the amulet from her twin brother Brian in order to get through this door to Camelot, and not necessarily that he has to give up the amulet, but Apocalypse needs him here so that he can use it to figure out a way to pass through this door. And so now when Betsy arrives to see her brother Brian, who she had literally left not long before, like when she arrives here and she sees him already suited up, with him being on his way to Avalon and finding out that it's an emergency, she immediately tells him that she's gonna go with them, because with her just finding out about this, along with what she's heard from Apocalypse, she has reasons to believe that her brother being called over there is just a trap. And essentially it is, because when they arrive there, there's a couple of things that pop out pretty quickly, because one, Morgan Le Fay considers Brian Braddock to be an oath breaker, because essentially through the amulet, the source of his power, he was sworn to be loyal to Merlin. And now that Morgan Le Fay has become Queen Regent, that oath and that loyalty has been passed to her, and from her perspective, he hasn't been doing a good job at protecting Camelot. And as far as his twin sister, Betsy, who's a mutant, to whom Otherworlders consider to be witchbred, Morgan Le Fay now directly sees Betsy as an enemy because she's recently discovered that the mutants, aka the witchbred, they are the source of this strange weed which has been growing within the waters of Avalon. So what Morgan Le Fay immediately does is she takes Brian Braddock, reclaiming him as her knight, and at the last minute when this happens, Brian passes his amulet to Betsy. And so now while this is happening, back in Krakoa with Apocalypse, who's been studying this door and also keeping an eye on Betsy Braddock, but at this point in time he's also called for Rogue to absorb some of the magic from this door in order to weaken it. But also while this is happening, on the other side, Apocalypse has made a connection to Betsy to where at the same time that Rogue is reaching for the door, Apocalypse tells Betsy to disrupt it, which in a way it's kind of dirty on Apocalypse's part, because on neither side is he giving everybody all of the information, but it's almost like he's in a group chat telling two people to jump through the same door at the same time. But I guess in his defense, like when he's telling Betsy to disrupt the door at the same time that he's telling Rogue to drain some of its magic, it's almost like, okay, he has a plan that he needs them to execute, and if they're strong enough, cool, and if not, okay, like to him that's also cool. But also, just to be clear, this was a plan that Gambit hated from the jump, because from here, when Rogue is turned into Sleeping Beauty, Gambit immediately runs up on Apocalypse. And I mean, it's like Gambit did tell Apocalypse like if anything happens to Rogue that he's gonna kick his butt, and at the time Apocalypse was like, you know, I would like to see you try, because it's like really, you gonna really, like I wouldn't have minded that conversation would have went on for like a few more panels. Like, imagine Apocalypse just making an announcement to the whole island of Krakoa, like, attention mutants of Krakoa, Gambit said he gonna whoop my head, and then the whole island just bust out laughing. I'm like, what he gonna do, hit him with that Joker deuce deuce? Probably not. But with the turn of events, Betsy Braddock has made her way out as a new Captain Britain, and at this point in time, she's not even sure exactly what has happened to Rogue in the middle of this process. But from here, jumping back over to Mariana Stern, who has pretty much sacrificed her whole coven, and with doing so, switched over to the the coven Akaba, which is the coven that's tied to Apocalypse and his blood descendants, because it's like Mariana, she's figured that, okay, Morgan Le Fay has cut her off from magic, so now it's sacrificing her coven and going over to the coven Akaba, who are also former servants of Apocalypse, who he later rejected after they devoted their lives to him, but he had mainly did so because this coven believed that their power was on par with mutants, which caused Apocalypse to be like, look, you missed me with all that. But so for Mariana Stern, this appears to be her attempt to ally herself with a power that could vie against them. But after this, we go back to Betsy, Gambit, and Jubilee, who hitch a ride with Kate Pryde in order to get to the Braddock Lighthouse in hopes that it'll have a solution in order to fix what's going on the road. But on their way in search of this lighthouse, their ship is attacked by a group of Selkies, who are like these seal people, who if I'm not mistaken, they go back to like the early history of Camelot, like before its location in Otherworld, and even before the fall of Atlantis. But also when I see this, I can't help but to think, like, I took a friend of mine to the aquarium, and like while we were there, her and I went on this tour, and they group you up with people on this tour. And so when our group got to the seals, our guide had asked us, does anyone here know what sound a seal makes? And just about before our guide could finish her sentence, like this grown man in the back was like, and we just looked down like, bro, you a grown man, like what are you doing? And it's like, I don't mean to judge, but I'm judging just a little bit. But either way, what was I at? Oh yeah, the group of Selkies. But so now while they're attacked by them, Betsy realizes that they're mainly coming after her. And it's for this reason she jumps off the boat and lures them towards the land, because once she gets on the land, they can't follow her on the dry surface. And immediately Gambit thinks this is like an effort to ditch Rogue and just run for it, or swim for it, then run for it. But Betsy has that covered so that Gambit and Jubilee can also make it to land, and Kitty Pryde can just go back to maraudering. But even now still, with it getting dark, they still see no sign of this lighthouse. But not long after, during their search, Betsy spots a group of people in these green cloaks who only she can see, like Gambit and Rogue don't know who or what she's talking to. But this group of people, who are known as the Druids, they recognize Betsy as a seer since she can in fact see them and hear them, and when she approaches them, they inform her of Mariana and what she's up to, with her powers from Morgan Le Fay waning and her swearing a new loyalty to a group who rejects mutant descendancy. But as far as the Druids, they're on Kate's side. They're on the side of the mutants, and they're on the side of Krakoa, because they believe that the mutants will protect them from the dangers that's to come. And it's also why they're willing to share portions of England with the mutants and Krakoa because of this belief. But in addition to this, we also get a bit more history about this location, and like a bit of reference to Apocalypse and his history with the Druids. And when we get this flashback to a point in time when Apocalypse was associated with the Akaba, which was also a time when Apocalypse was considered to be the first of its kind. Like during this time, a couple of Druids who were mutants, who were also like twin brother and sister, but when Apocalypse had encountered them here in England, and in the 4th century BCE, they were being exiled because they were mutants. And when Apocalypse seen this, being the warm-hearted person that he is, he just watched them die, and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna put a pin in this location and I'm gonna remember where this happened. And that's really just one of the things about Apocalypse, because now, like centuries later, I mean, he's worked on it, but even with us seeing these gradual changes in him, I believe there's a lot of old Apocalypse that's not going anywhere. Because back at the time when he allowed the 2 mutant Druids to drown in the water, and we don't know for certain that they're dead, we may run into them later on down the line, and that's something that's just possible. But the reason that Apocalypse did not assist them is because one of his main rules is that he doesn't help others who cause themselves harm by their own means, which an argument could be made for that's pretty much everybody. But in the case of Betsy and the others, after getting this vision from the Druids, of whom that she can only see, it's then that the roots which were surrounding Rogue, they grow into a light tower, pushing Rogue all the way to the top, to where at the top, Rogue started to glow even brighter, becoming the light for that lighthouse. And though Betsy and the others didn't fully understand this, as the reader, we're informed that this was a combination of a couple things, with one being the science and wonders of Krakoa, but in addition to that, especially here in England, there are certain magics that permit certain things to happen. So after the attack on the previous lighthouse, this one growing here was like the Druids giving Betsy their blessing. But so after they go inside and just try to get a little sleep, Jubilee has a nightmare about Apocalypse just babysitting Shogo, and all he was doing in the dream was holding the baby, but it was enough to spook her to go get her child. So she rushes in the middle of the night to the closest gate to go back to Krakoa and bring Shogo here. And so now for Betsy, while she's sleeping, she has this dream or vision that's like a sign of her affirming that she accepts her call as a protector, to where in addition to this, she sees Apocalypse in her dream as well, and she's shown a sign as well that says he will use us, so we will also use him. And so now not long after this, to where at this time Jubilee has already gone and gotten Shogo, and the Druids then arrive, telling Betsy that they recognize her as Captain Britain, and how important it is that she stands with them and protect them from the Akaba, who in the middle of this conversation immediately show up and make their attempt to destroy this new lighthouse, much like they did the previous one. And when this happens, Apocalypse chimes in and he's kind of like, I see what you're doing and it's cute, but if you want your brother to live out there in Otherworld, then you gotta go get him. And so now for Betsy, who's like struggling to fight all these people off, she lets Apocalypse know that she cannot leave this lighthouse unguarded. So Apocalypse at that point, he's just like, okay, hold my beer. Because at this point, he's just like, okay, these guys are nothing, let me just get them out the way real quick. And even though Betsy's just like, don't help me, I can do this, Apocalypse just waves his hand and it's over. And like what was a battle for Captain Britain was just like a high five for Apocalypse. And even around this time, Betsy, she asks Apocalypse, like, is he involved with the gates and everything showing up in Camelot? And he doesn't really give her a direct answer. He just really tells her that there's a spark to a cleansing flame. But in addition to her heading out there, Apocalypse assures her that he'll guard the lighthouse. And of course, Gambit doesn't want to go because Rogue is the light of that lighthouse. But Betsy insists that Gambit goes with her to Otherworld because she needs him fighting by her side. And as far as Jubilee, who's definitely going, but before she goes, she's like, I need to take Shogo back to Krakoa first. But before she even gets the opportunity to do so, Shogo just disappears, and before you know it, they're in Otherworld and Shogo's a dragon because it's magic. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Like with Excalibur, you can tell there's a lot of groundwork that's getting like reformed and in some cases reapplied to set the tone for the X-Men for years to come. And though at this point in time, Dawn of X is slightly blending Excalibur with New Mutants and X-Force, Marauders and the others, as of right now, most of my excitement is sitting with the Hellfire Club and many of their deep ties throughout the years, especially with the ties like Betsy and Brian's father, who I believe at one point in time was the Black Bishop, which may or may not be something that's referenced to at some point in time with everything going on with Sebastian and Shinobi Shaw, but it's one of the things that I like that they're doing so far as bringing back a lot of that old history. And so with this new Dawn of X-Men, it doesn't just feel like this history has just been wiped away. But either way, let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.